On a sun-scorched Philly street, a man was told to get on the sidewalk. He complied. Seconds later, he was tasered and arrested for assault. The officer's body cam was off, but bystander cameras were not. The mid-August sun beat down on the South Philadelphia street, making the air thick and wavy above the asphalt. It was the kind of lazy Tuesday afternoon that felt like a permanent part of the city's rhythm. The faint, greasy aroma of cheesesteaks drifted from a corner shop, mixing with the sweet scent of water ice. Down the block, a fire hydrant, unofficially opened, sprayed a glorious arc of cool water, and the gleeful shrieks of neighborhood kids echoed off the brick row houses. Darren leaned against the familiar red brick wall of a laundromat, a cold bottle of root beer sweating in his hand. He and his best friend, Jamal, were mapping out their weekend, debating the merits of a barbecue versus catching a Phillies game. Darren, wearing a vintage Allen Iverson 76ers jersey, laughed, the sound easy and unburdened. He was a man at home, in his element, surrounded by the sights and sounds that had been the backdrop of his entire life. The world, for that moment, was simple. That simplicity shattered when the patrol car appeared. It wasn't the car itself that was alarming, they were a constant presence. It was the way it moved. It didn't cruise, it stalked. The Ford Explorer SUV slowed abruptly, its tires hissing against the hot pavement, and swung toward the curb with a predatory arrogance, stopping so close that its bumper nearly kissed the concrete. The driver's side door flew open, slamming against its frame with a percussive crack that made several people on the street flinch. Out stepped Officer Christopher O'Donnell. He was a wall of navy blue, his posture rigid, his presence immediately sucking the warmth out of the afternoon. Mirrored aviator sunglasses hid his eyes, reflecting a distorted, fisheye version of the street back at itself. His jaw was a tight knot of tension, a muscle twitching just below his ear. He didn't scan the area, he seemed to have already chosen his target. His focus locked on Darren. Jamal, sensing the shift in atmosphere, subtly straightened up, his easy smile vanishing. "Is there a problem here?" O'Donnell's voice cut through the air, devoid of any preamble or courtesy. It was flat, hard, and loud. "Get your little meeting off my asphalt. Now." Darren blinked, momentarily confused. He wasn't in the street. He was on the very edge of it, one foot on the curb, the other on the pavement, deep in a conversation. They weren't blocking traffic, there wasn't even any traffic to block. He raised his free hand, the one not holding the root beer, in a universal gesture of peace. "Officer, we're just talking," Darren said, his tone even and respectful. He knew the rules of this game. Stay calm. Don't escalate. No need for this. We're not in the way. O'Donnell took 2 deliberate, heavy steps forward, closing the distance until he was invading Darren's personal space. The scent of stale coffee and disinfectant rolled off him. "I didn't ask if you were in the way. I gave you an order. Get on the sidewalk. I am on the—" Darren never finished the sentence. O'Donnell's hands shot out, not to guide, but to punish. He shoved Darren, hard, in the center of his chest. It wasn't a nudge, it was a violent, explosive push, powered by the full weight of his body. The force was stunning, unexpected. Darren's feet tangled as he stumbled backward, his shoulder slamming hard against the brick wall he'd been casually leaning on just seconds before. A sharp, radiating pain shot through his arm, and his root beer bottle slipped from his grasp, shattering on the concrete with a sound that seemed, for a moment, as loud as a gunshot. A wave of hot, prickling humiliation washed over Darren. It was followed instantly by a surge of raw anger. He hadn't done anything. He had followed the unwritten rules, kept his voice low, his hands visible. And for that, he got pain and the jagged sound of breaking glass. His mind screamed, but years of ingrained caution held his tongue. "Don't react," a voice in his head pleaded. "Any reaction is a weapon he will use against you." He pushed himself off the wall, his shoulder throbbing. "Yo, what was that for?" Darren asked, his voice tight but controlled. "You don't have the right to put your hands on me." From across the street, a new voice pierced the tension. "Hey! He's on the sidewalk now. Why are you touching him?" It was his girlfriend, Maya. She had been on her way to meet him, and now she stood frozen, her phone held up, its camera lens a small, dark eye capturing everything. Her voice broke the spell of shocked silence. A teenager on a skateboard, who had stopped to watch, now also had his phone out, the screen reflecting the unfolding drama. From a second-story window above the corner store, an elderly woman who had been watering her geraniums leaned out, her face a mask of disbelief. "Leave that boy alone," she shouted. This chorus of witnesses didn't deter Officer O'Donnell. It seemed to fuel him. He saw their phones not as a check on his power, but as a challenge to his authority. A smirk flickered at the edge of his lips, a chilling expression of contempt. He ignored the voices, his entire focus lasered in on Darren. "I'll tell you what right I have," O'Donnell said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He took another step forward, backing Darren further onto the wide expanse of the sidewalk. "You're going to learn to respect the uniform." "I was respecting you," Darren countered, his hands now held up by his sides, palms open. A clear sign of non-aggression. "You're the one who came out here looking for a fight. Turn around," O'Donnell commanded, reaching for Darren's arm. "Don't touch me, man," Darren said, pulling his arm back. "You have no reason to arrest me." That was it. That was the final trigger. For O'Donnell, this wasn't about law and order anymore. It was about dominance. With a motion that was terrifyingly fluid, his right hand unclipped the strap of his holster. But it wasn't his firearm he reached for. It was the bright, garish yellow Taser X26P nestled beside it. The plastic weapon looked like a toy, but the sound it made was anything but playful. O'Donnell thumbed the safety switch off, and the device emitted a low, electrical hum, a predatory whine that promised pain. The air around it seemed to crackle, the sound cutting through the street noise and silencing the protests. He raised the Taser, his arm locked straight, aiming it directly at the center of Darren's chest. From the front of the weapon, a pair of tiny red laser dots appeared, dancing on the faded '3 of Darren's Iverson jersey. Time slowed to a crawl. The laser dots were two angry red eyes. Maya's gasp was a choked-off whisper. The world held its breath, balanced on the knife's edge of a police officer's rage. Darren stared down the barrel of the Taser, his heart hammering against his ribs, right where the red dots trembled. The world narrowed to the space between Darren and the Taser. He was fully on the sidewalk, a good 6 feet from the street O'Donnell had ordered him off of. His hands were up, open and empty. He was a statue of compliance, a textbook example of de-escalation. It didn't matter. O'Donnell's finger tightened on the trigger. There was a loud pop, a sound like a champagne cork mixed with a firecracker, as compressed nitrogen cartridges fired. Two tiny, dart-like probes, trailing thin, glistening copper wires, shot through the air. They moved faster than the eye could properly track, but for Darren, it felt like an eternity. He saw them coming, two miniature harpoons destined for his chest. They struck his jersey with a pair of sharp, distinct thuds. The barbs dug into the fabric, embedding themselves. And then the electricity came. 5,000 volts of raw, chaotic energy hijacked his body. It was not a simple shock, it was a complete and violent neurological takeover. An invisible giant seized every muscle, every nerve, and squeezed. His entire torso went rigid, his limbs locking in unnatural angles. A guttural, agonized cry was ripped from his throat, but his diaphragm was spasming so violently he couldn't draw enough breath to give it sound. It came out as a strangled, helpless groan. His body, now a marionette with its strings pulled taut by lightning, fell backward. There was no grace in the fall, no instinct to catch himself. He was a plank of wood toppling over. His head hit the gritty concrete with a sickening, hollow thud that echoed louder than the Taser's crackle. The world became a meaningless kaleidoscope of spinning bricks, blue sky, and horrified faces. The 5-second cycle felt like a lifetime of torture. His muscles convulsed rhythmically with the pulse of the current, pinning him to the ground in his own private hell. He could feel the rough texture of the sidewalk grinding against his cheek, could smell the ozone in the air, a sharp, metallic scent like a lightning strike up close. From somewhere far away, he heard a scream. A pure, piercing shriek of terror and rage. It was Maya. Her voice was the only thing that cut through the deafening roar of the electricity in his ears. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The current stopped. His muscles, finally released, went limp and useless. He lay on the ground, twitching, a prisoner in his own exhausted body. Every nerve ending was on fire. He tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't obey. He could only gasp, dragging hot, dusty air into his burning lungs. Officer O'Donnell lowered the taser, his expression unreadable behind the mirrored sunglasses. He stood over Darren's prone form, not with concern, not with urgency, but with the detached, analytical calm of a man who had just put down a malfunctioning piece of machinery. He surveyed his work, the man on the ground, the dangling taser wires, the terrified girlfriend, the silent, recording bystanders. The scene was one of his own making, a tableau of unnecessary violence painted on a public sidewalk. And in his posture, there was not a flicker of regret. The silence that followed the taser's hum was heavy and suffocating. It was broken only by Maya's ragged sobs and Darren's painful, shallow breaths. O'Donnell holstered his taser and, with a deliberate lack of haste, unclipped his handcuffs. He strode over to Darren, who was still struggling to reconnect his brain to his limbs. "Put your hands behind your back," O'Donnell commanded, his voice as flat and lifeless as before. Darren couldn't process the words. His mind was a fog of pain and confusion. He managed to roll onto his stomach, his muscles screaming in protest. O'Donnell grabbed his arms, wrenched them behind his back, and cinched the cold, serrated steel of the handcuffs around his wrists. The metal bit into his skin. "What for?" Darren managed to choke out, the words scraping his throat. O'Donnell hoisted him to his feet. The world swam violently. As Darren was being marched toward the patrol car, he heard O'Donnell speak into the radio clip to his shoulder. The words that came out were so divorced from reality that Darren thought he must have misheard, that the electricity had scrambled his senses. "Dispatch, I have one suspect in custody." O'Donnell's voice was the epitome of professional calm. "En route to the precinct. Charge will be assault on a law enforcement officer." Assaulting, who? The thought echoed in the buzzing cavern of Darren's skull. He assaulted me. The world saw him assault me. He looked from O'Donnell's impassive face to Maya's, which was streaked with tears and disbelief. He saw the teenager with the phone, his mouth hanging open in shock. The reality of the situation crashed down on him with more force than the fall to the pavement. The video didn't matter. The witnesses didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. The story was already being written, and he was its villain. Across the street, Maya watched them shove Darren into the back of the police car. A primal scream of frustration built in her chest, but she choked it down. Screaming wouldn't help him. Panic gave way to a cold, hard resolve. Her hands, which had been trembling, suddenly grew steady. She looked down at her phone, at the video file she had just recorded. It was all there. The shove. The argument. The taser. The fall. The truth. It was her only weapon. While O'Donnell leaned against his car, taking a moment before getting in, a moment where his hand moved near his chest, near the dark lens of his body camera, Maya's thumbs flew across her screen. She opened Instagram. She tagged local news outlets, community activists, and the city council page. Her fingers flew as she typed a caption, a raw, desperate plea for the world to see what she just saw. "My boyfriend Darren was just assaulted and tossed by a Philly cop for no reason. He was on the sidewalk. Now they arrested him saying he assaulted the cop. Please watch and share. This is not right. The police car's siren wailed to life, a mocking cry of official power. It pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic and disappearing down the street, leaving a stain on the sidewalk and a group of stunned witnesses in its wake. But Maya wasn't looking at the car anymore. She was looking at her phone. With a final, determined tap, she pressed post. The digital fuse was lit. The internet moves faster than a police cruiser. Before Darren's paperwork was even filed at the precinct, the video was already multiplying. It started with Maya's friends and followers, then leaped to community groups, then to activist networks. The view count on the Instagram post was a blur. 1,000, 10,000, 50,000. Each view was a new witness. Each share was a sworn affidavit. The comments section exploded into a raw, unfiltered referendum on justice. OMG. He was just standing there. This is exactly what they do. The charge is always assault on an officer to cover their own asses. I live 2 blocks from there. That cop is always on a power trip. Sending prayers for that young man. The system is designed to fail us. By evening, local news blogs had embedded the video. Their headlines evolved by the hour. 6 p.m., video shows tense confrontation between officer and civilian. 8 p.m., outrage grows over viral video of Philadelphia officer tasing man. 10 p.m., officer in viral tasing video identified as Christopher O'Donnell. Someone, a self-styled online sleuth, had cross-referenced the patrol car number with public records. Soon, Officer O'Donnell's name was everywhere. With his name came history, rumors of past complaints, of a reputation for aggression that had been whispered about but never proven. The pressure turned toward official channels. City Councilman Kenyatta Johnson's verified Twitter account posted a screenshot of the video with a simple, blunt caption, "Yeah, this ain't cool. I'm on it." The chair of the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations publicly requested to be connected with the community members who were there. The digital pressure was creating real-world political heat. But from one source, there was only silence. The Philadelphia Police Department's official Twitter and Facebook pages continued with their scheduled programming, a post about a community policing event, a photo of a retiring K-9 unit. The contrast was jarring. The city was screaming about a fire, and the fire department was posting pictures of cats. This official silence was, in its own way, more damning than a denial. It felt like an institution closing ranks, the blue wall of silence manifesting as a void on a social media feed. It implied that this incident was not an aberration to be immediately condemned, but a problem to be managed. The video was no longer just a clip. It was evidence. It was a rallying cry. It had escaped the confines of that single South Philly street and was now ricocheting across the nation, a stark, undeniable portrait of an American reality. The story had gone from a personal nightmare to a public spectacle, and the world was now watching, waiting to see what the city of Philadelphia would do about the man behind the mirrored sunglasses. Darren was released on bail 24 hours later. He walked out of the precinct into a world that was different from the one he had left. The physical pain was beginning to subside, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and the cold dread of the legal fight ahead. He was no longer just Darren, he was the man from the video, a symbol. His face was on the news, his name in headlines. His lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman from a civil rights firm, sat with him and Maya in a small, cluttered office. "The charge is an absolute fabrication," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "But that doesn't make it go away. The DA's office doesn't like to drop cases against police officers. It looks bad for them. They will try to make you take a deal." She leaned forward, her expression grim. "You have to understand what we're up against. This isn't just about Officer O'Donnell. This is about a culture. This department has a history, going back to the days of Mayor Frank Rizzo, of rewarding aggression and burying complaints. O'Donnell is a symptom of a disease. The consequences for O'Donnell, meanwhile, were unfolding in the slow, opaque language of bureaucracy. The department issued a statement: "We are aware of the video circulating on social media. The incident is under internal investigation. The officer involved has been placed on administrative duty." Administrative duty. A paid vacation, Darren thought bitterly. While he was trying to figure out how to pay his legal fees and deal with the trauma that made him flinch every time he saw a patrol car, O'Donnell was at home, his salary secure, protected by his union and a system designed to shield its own. The story became a battle of narratives. The official police report, eventually leaked, was a work of fiction. It described Darren as verbally aggressive and physically defiant, claiming he had lunged at O'Donnell, forcing the officer to deploy his taser in self-defense. It was one man's word, sworn on a form, against a crystal-clear video seen by millions. The question that hung in the air was terrifying: in a court of law, which one would matter more? This single video changed everything, but the fight for accountability is far from over. What happens when the cameras turn off? What happens to the countless others whose stories are never filmed, never go viral? The officer's report claimed one thing, the video showed another. How many times does this happen without a camera rolling? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Please be civil and comment with respect for everyone involved. If this story matters to you, share it so more people can see the truth. And subscribe for updates on Darren's case and more stories that need to be told.